A warning from the void. The bridge of the Imperial dreadnought Eternal Sovereign was unusually quiet. Admiral Vorsen, a towering figure with a stern face, stared at the holographic screen in front of him. The distress signal had been playing on repeat, but he still couldn't believe what he was seeing. The screen showed a remote outpost at the edge of Imperial space. It was a desolate region, patrolled lightly because no one believed an attack could come from there. Yet, here it was, a giant Terran battleship emerging from hyperspace. The ship was massive, black as the void, with glowing red lights tracing its hull like veins. It moved with an eerie calm, dwarfing the small Imperial fleet that had tried to stop it. The video feed was chaotic. Imperial ships fired everything they had: laser cannons, plasma torpedoes, even experimental railguns. None of it mattered. The Terran battleship absorbed the attacks like they were nothing. One by one, the Imperial ships exploded, their bright flames extinguished quickly in the cold darkness of space. A young officer on the bridge broke the silence. "Admiral Vorsen, sir, we've never seen a ship like this before. What do we—" "Quiet," Vorsen barked. His voice was sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. He leaned forward, replaying the last moments of the transmission. The outpost's commander appeared on the screen, panic in his eyes. "This is Commander Herrick of Outpost Delta. We're under attack by a Terran vessel. It's not just a ship, it's—" The screen filled with static as the outpost's main station exploded in a brilliant flash. Then, silence. The transmission ended. The officer hesitated. "Sir, what did he mean?" "It's not just a ship." Vorsen didn't answer immediately. He turned to his second-in-command, Captain Dren. "Get me the Emperor. Now." Dren nodded and began working at the console. Vorsen stared at the holographic display, his mind racing. Terrans. The very word filled him with unease. Decades ago, the Empire had crushed the Terran colonies in a brutal campaign. They were supposed to be scattered, broken, their technology far inferior to the Empire's might. How could they have built something like this? Before he could think further, Dren turned to him, his face pale. "Sir, communications are down. All long-range signals have been cut off." Vorsen frowned. "What do you mean, cut off?" Dren swallowed hard. It's like they've blocked everything. We can't contact the Emperor. We can't even send out a warning." The silence on the bridge grew heavier. Vorsen clenched his fists. Whoever these Terrans were, they weren't just launching an attack. They were sending a message. Suddenly, the bridge lights flickered. The holographic display scrambled, replaced by static. Then, a deep mechanical voice echoed through the ship. "Imperial forces, your reign of tyranny is over." The voice was calm but cold, each word carrying a weight that sent chills down the spines of the crew. Vorsen's eyes narrowed as the voice continued. "This is Captain Rhea of the Iron Vanguard. Your crimes against humanity will not go unpunished. Surrender now, and you may live to see another day. Resist, and your empire will burn." The message ended abruptly, and the screen returned to normal. The crew exchanged nervous glances, whispers filling the air. Vorsen slammed his hand on the console. "Enough." His voice silenced the room. He stood tall, his presence commanding. "We are the Imperial Navy. We do not cower before threats, especially from Terrans." He pointed at Dren. "Prepare the fleet. I want every available ship ready to intercept this Iron Vanguard. And find a way to get a message to the Emperor, no matter what it takes." Dren nodded, but his movements were stiff. The crew scrambled to their stations, but Vorsen could see the fear in their eyes. They all had the same unspoken question. Could the Empire truly stand against a ship like that? As the fleet mobilized, Vorsen returned to his quarters. He pored over the data from the distress signal, studying every frame of the Terran ship. Its design was unfamiliar, advanced in ways the Empire hadn't seen before. Where had the Terrans been hiding all these years? How had they built such a monstrosity? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Captain Dren entered, looking uneasy. "Sir, there's something else." Our intelligence team analyzed the message. It wasn't just broadcast to us. Vorsen's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Dren hesitated. It was broadcast across the entire sector. Every Imperial outpost, every civilian colony. They all heard it. Vorsen's jaw tightened. This wasn't just an attack. It was a declaration of war. The Terrans weren't hiding anymore. They wanted the entire galaxy to know they were back. The Admiral stared out of the viewport, watching as his fleet prepared for battle. In the distance, the stars shimmered, indifferent to the chaos that was about to unfold. Vorsen's grip on the railing tightened. Whatever it took, he would not let the Empire fall. Not to Terrans. Not to anyone. But deep in his gut, a nagging fear remained. The Iron Vanguard was unlike anything the Empire had ever faced. And if they failed to stop it here, this might be the beginning of the Empire's end. The Terran ship strikes first. The Imperial fleet assembled in record time. Dozens of sleek, metallic warships hovered in formation, their engines glowing against the backdrop of deep space. Admiral Vorsen stood on the bridge of the Eternal Sovereign, watching as his forces prepared for a counterattack. He knew they were ready to fight, but he couldn't shake the image of the Iron Vanguard from his mind, a shadow of destruction cutting through his fleet like paper. "Status report," he demanded, his voice sharp. Captain Dren stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "The fleet is ready, Admiral. 47 ships armed and positioned. We've calculated the most likely trajectory for the Terran vessel. If it maintains course, we can intercept them at the Cowris system." Vorsen nodded. "Good. And the planetary defenses?" Dren hesitated. "The Cowris system has minimal defenses, sir. It wasn't considered a strategic location." Vorsen clenched his jaw. The Terrans were clever, striking where the Empire was weakest. He turned back to the viewport. "Then we'll make Cowris a trap they won't escape." But the Terrans didn't wait to be intercepted. The Iron Vanguard appeared in the Cowris system without warning, dropping out of hyperspace like a predator stalking its prey. Its black hull gleamed under the light of the system's twin suns, and its sheer size dwarfed the Imperial ships waiting for it. The Iron Vanguard didn't fire immediately. Instead, it hung in space, as if taunting the Empire's forces. On the Eternal Sovereign, tension filled the air. "Admiral, we have visual on the Terran vessel," an officer reported. "It's holding position." Vorsen frowned. "Why?" They could have attacked by now. Before anyone could answer, the Terran ship's systems flared to life. Bright red energy surged along its hull, crackling like lightning. A low hum filled the bridge of the Eternal Sovereign, though the source of the sound wasn't clear. Then the Iron Vanguard fired. It wasn't a traditional weapon. A beam of pulsating red energy shot from the Terran ship, but instead of hitting the Imperial fleet directly, it struck the nearest star. The beam caused the star to pulse violently, its surface rippling with fiery waves. Moments later, a massive solar flare erupted, racing toward the Imperial fleet at unimaginable speed. "Evade!" Vorsen roared, but it was too late. The solar flare tore through the smaller ships, vaporizing them instantly. Larger vessels managed to deploy shields, but the intense heat and radiation overwhelmed many of them. The Eternal Sovereign shook violently as its shields struggled to hold. "Damage report," Vorsen barked. "Severe damage to the fleet, Admiral," Dren said, his voice trembling. "We've already lost 15 ships." Vorsen slammed his fist on the console. The Iron Vanguard hadn't even targeted his fleet directly, yet the devastation was catastrophic. It was a show of power, a warning. On the Iron Vanguard, Captain Rhea watched the destruction with a cold, calculating gaze. She stood tall, her black uniform pristine, her face unreadable. Around her, the crew worked in silence, their movements efficient and precise. "Status?" she asked. A young officer turned to her. The solar flare neutralized over a third of their forces, Captain. Remaining ships are regrouping, but their formation is in disarray. Rhea nodded. Good. Open the comms. Let's remind them why we're here. A holographic display lit up on the Iron Vanguard's bridge, showing the faces of Vorson and his command staff. Rhea stepped forward, her voice calm but filled with steel. Admiral Vorson, I am Captain Rhea of the Iron Vanguard. You were warned. Your Empire's crimes against humanity will no longer be tolerated. You can either surrender now or watch your forces burn. Vorson's face twisted with anger. Terran scum. You think one ship can stand against the might of the Empire? Rhea tilted her head slightly. This isn't just a ship, Admiral. This is justice. And we are not alone. Before Vorson could respond, a second Terran ship appeared on the edge of the system, smaller but equally menacing. Then another, and another. Within minutes, 5 more Terran vessels joined the Iron Vanguard, their sleek designs reflecting years of hidden technological advancement. Panic rippled through the Imperial fleet. The Terrans weren't supposed to have resources, let alone an armada. And yet, here they were, overwhelming an entire sector with a force no one thought possible. Admiral, we have to retreat, Dren said, desperation in his voice. We're outnumbered and outgunned. Vorson glared at him. No, we hold the line. Order the fleet to focus fire on the Iron Vanguard. If we take down their flagship, the rest will fall. The command was given, and the Imperial fleet opened fire. Hundreds of energy blasts streaked across space, converging on the Iron Vanguard. But the Terran ship's shields held, absorbing the onslaught like a stone weathering a storm. Then, it retaliated. This time, the Iron Vanguard targeted the Imperial fleet directly. Its main cannon fired again, but instead of a solar flare, it released a pulse of gravitational energy. The pulse slammed into the Imperial ships, bending their hulls and crushing smaller vessels outright. The bridge of the Eternal Sovereign shook as alarms blared. Admiral, their weapon is destabilizing our systems. An officer shouted. Vorson gritted his teeth. Reroute all power to the shields. We can't let them. The Iron Vanguard fired once more, this time disabling the Eternal Sovereign's engines. The Imperial flagship drifted helplessly, its weapons offline. On the Terran ship, Rhea watched the Imperial fleet crumble. Send the final message, she ordered. A voice echoed across the system, broadcast to every Imperial ship and outpost. This is the price of your Empire's arrogance. The Terrans have returned. Prepare for the end. As the transmission ended, Captain Rhea smiled faintly. The battle wasn't over, but the message was clear. The Empire was no longer untouchable. The Terrans had struck, and they wouldn't stop until the galaxy was free. Empire's retaliation. The Imperial High Command erupted into chaos as news of the Iron Vanguard and its fleet spread like wildfire. Holoscreens in the War Council chamber displayed reports from the Kaurus system. Fleets annihilated, communications scrambled, and the Terran forces advancing unchallenged. The Emperor's advisors shouted over one another, debating strategies and assigning blame. At the center of it all stood Admiral Vorson, his uniform torn, but his resolve unshaken. We need to counterattack. Vorson bellowed, silencing the room. His voice echoed in the vast chamber. If we let them continue, they'll rip through our core systems. The Emperor, an aging man with a gaunt face and piercing eyes, finally spoke. And what, Admiral, do you suggest? Half of our fleets are in disarray, and the Iron Vanguard is unlike anything we've faced. Vorson stepped forward, his tone firm. Deploy the Omega Fleet. Gasps filled the room. The Omega Fleet was the Empire's most secret weapon, an elite armada equipped with advanced warships and experimental weaponry. Even the advisors, privy to many secrets of the Empire, knew little about its full capabilities. Admiral, the Emperor said, his voice laced with warning, the Omega Fleet is not to be used lightly. Its activation risks drawing attention to assets we are not ready to reveal. With respect, Your Majesty, Vorson replied, the Terrans have already revealed their assets. If we don't strike back with everything we have, we'll lose more than this war. We'll lose the Empire itself. The Emperor hesitated, then gave a slow nod. Very well. You have my authorization. Aboard the Iron Vanguard, Captain Rhea stood on the bridge, reviewing their next target, an Imperial weapons depot orbiting the barren moon of Velaros Prime. The depot was lightly defended, but its destruction would cripple Imperial supply chains in the sector. Status report, Rhea said, her voice calm and commanding. Her first officer, a tall man with sharp features named Lauren, stepped forward. The fleet is fully operational, Captain. Scans show minimal resistance at Velaros Prime, just a few automated defense platforms and a handful of frigates. It'll be quick. Rhea didn't smile, but there was a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. Good. We strike in 2 hours. No survivors. But as the Terran fleet prepared to move, alarms blared across the Iron Vanguard. Rhea turned sharply toward her tactical officer. Report. Multiple warp signatures detected, Captain, the officer said, his fingers flying across the console. They're not standard Imperial ships. These readings are off the charts. Rhea frowned, stepping closer to the holographic display. Put it on screen. Before her, an image appeared, a fleet of sleek, angular warships materializing from hyperspace. Their hulls gleamed with a strange, iridescent alloy, and their weapons pulsed with an eerie green energy. The Omega fleet had arrived. The first strike was immediate. One of the Omega fleet's warships fired a concentrated energy beam that pierced through the Terran frigate Vanguard's light as if it were paper. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, scattering debris across the battlefield. On the Iron Vanguard, chaos erupted. Shields up. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Rhea barked, her voice cutting through the noise. Tactical, analyze those weapons. I want to know what we're up against. As her crew scrambled to respond, the Omega fleet advanced. Their ships moved with precision, their formations tight and deliberate. Each Imperial vessel carried experimental weaponry, designed specifically for warfare on an unprecedented scale. The Terran ships, outnumbered and outgunned, struggled to keep up. Captain, Lauren said, his voice tense, our weapons aren't breaking through their shields. Whatever tech they're using, it's years ahead of anything we've seen. Rhea's jaw tightened. Then we need to fight smarter, not harder. Deploy the Vanguard's drone swarms. Use their speed to disrupt their formations. Hundreds of small, agile drones launched from the Iron Vanguard, swarming the Imperial fleet like angry hornets. The drones moved too quickly for the larger warships to target effectively, buzzing around and targeting weak points in their armor. For a moment, the tide began to turn. But the Omega fleet wasn't without counters. One of the Imperial ships unleashed a pulse wave, disabling the drones in an instant. Rhea watched as her tactical advantage evaporated before her eyes. On the bridge of the Omega fleet's flagship, Admiral Vorson observed the battle with cold satisfaction. They're resourceful, he said, almost admiringly. But resourcefulness won't save them. Shall we engage the singularity cannon, Admiral? His weapons officer asked. Vorson hesitated. The singularity cannon was their most devastating weapon, capable of generating controlled black holes. It wasn't just destructive, it was catastrophic. Using it risked destabilizing the entire battlefield. No, Vorson said finally. Not yet. I want them alive long enough to witness their defeat. Order the fleet to press forward. The Omega fleet surged ahead, overwhelming the Terran ships. One by one, the smaller Terran vessels were destroyed, until only the Iron Vanguard remained. Rhea stood firm on the bridge of her ship, even as alarms blared and the hull groaned under the strain of constant fire. Damage report, she shouted. Our shields are at 20%, Captain, Lauren replied. Hull breaches on decks 5 through 7. We can't take much more of this. Rhea clenched her fists. She had anticipated resistance, but not on this scale. The Omega fleet was a force of nature, and even the Iron Vanguard couldn't hold out forever. But then, an idea struck her, desperate, bold, and utterly reckless. "Prepare the singularity drive," she said. The crew froze. Lauren stared at her in disbelief. "Captain, the singularity drive is unstable. If we use it now, we won't survive this battle without it," Rhea interrupted. "If the drive destabilizes, it's a risk I'm willing to take. Activate it." The crew obeyed, though uneasily. As the singularity drive powered up, the Iron Vanguard began to emit a deep, resonant hum. A field of swirling energy formed around the ship, growing larger with every passing second. On the Eternal Sovereign, Vorsen's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. They're activating their own singularity weapon. "All ships, retreat. Pull back now." But it was too late. The Iron Vanguard unleashed its singularity drive, creating a massive gravitational well that tore through the battlefield. Imperial and Terran ships alike were pulled into its vortex, crushed under the immense gravitational pressure. As the Omega fleet scrambled to escape, Rhea gave one final order: "Full warp. Get us out of here." The Iron Vanguard disappeared into hyperspace, leaving chaos in its wake. The battlefield was silent, save for the lingering echoes of destruction. Vorsen stood on the bridge of his battered flagship, watching as the remnants of his fleet drifted through space. He clenched his fists, anger and humiliation burning in his chest. "This isn't over," he growled. "The Iron Vanguard may have escaped, but we'll hunt them to the ends of the galaxy if we must." Far away, in the quiet of hyperspace, Captain Rhea leaned back in her chair, her face pale but resolute. The Iron Vanguard had survived, for now. But the cost of their escape weighed heavily on her. The war was far from over, and she knew the next battle would be even deadlier. A message to the galaxy. The aftermath of the battle in the Calris system sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Imperial fleets limped back to their strongholds, their once mighty ships battered and humiliated. Whispers of the Iron Vanguard spread like wildfire through every corner of Imperial space. To some, it was a terror. To others, it was hope. In the heart of the Terran fleet, Captain Rhea prepared to send a message that would change the balance of power forever. Aboard the Iron Vanguard. The command bridge of the Iron Vanguard was a hive of quiet activity. Though they had survived the Omega fleet, the cost was evident in the weary faces of the crew and the damaged systems flickering around them. Captain Rhea, standing tall despite her exhaustion, reviewed the transmission prepared by her communications officer. "Is it ready?" Rhea asked, her voice steady but edged with urgency. The officer nodded. "Yes, Captain. It's set to broadcast across all Imperial channels, from the core worlds to the fringe colonies. The encryption ensures they can't shut it down immediately." Rhea looked to her first officer, Lauren. "And the content?" Lauren handed her a datapad. "Clear and uncompromising, just as you requested. It highlights the atrocities of the Empire, slave colonies, planetary purges, forced conscriptions. We also included footage of the Iron Vanguard destroying Imperial fleets." Rhea read the message, her jaw tightening. She knew this wasn't just a broadcast. It was a declaration of rebellion, a rallying cry for the oppressed. Satisfied, she nodded. "Transmit it." The officer hesitated for a moment, then pressed the button. Across Imperial space, screens lit up, interrupting broadcasts, propaganda, and even private transmissions. The broadcast. A holographic image of Captain Rhea appeared before billions of Imperial citizens. Her voice was calm but filled with a quiet intensity that demanded attention. "People of the Empire," she began. "For too long, you have suffered under the iron fist of oppression. Your freedoms stolen, your families torn apart, your lives dictated by the whims of tyrants. No more." The image shifted to scenes of devastation caused by the Empire. Scorched colonies, children in chains, mass graves on barren worlds. Gasps filled rooms across the galaxy as citizens saw the atrocities their government had kept hidden. "I am Captain Rhea of the Iron Vanguard," she continued. "We are Terrans, the people your empire tried to wipe out decades ago. We survived, and now we stand united, not just for Terrans, but for every species crushed beneath the Empire's heel." The broadcast cut to footage of the Iron Vanguard in battle, annihilating Imperial fleets with precision and power. Rhea's voice rose, resonating with determination. "This is not a war of conquest. It is a war for freedom. Rise with us, and together we will dismantle this empire and build a future where no one lives in fear." The transmission ended with a single chilling statement. "The Terrans have returned, and we are not afraid." The reaction. The broadcast sparked chaos across the Empire. On core worlds, where Imperial propaganda had kept citizens loyal, fear and confusion took hold. The Emperor appeared on screens shortly after, condemning the Terrans as terrorists and urging the population to remain loyal to the crown. But on the outer colonies, the reaction was different. These were the places where the Empire's cruelty was most deeply felt. Workers in factory worlds stopped their machines to cheer. Miners in the asteroid belts raised their fists in solidarity. Entire garrisons of conscripted soldiers laid down their weapons, inspired by the Terran message. On one remote farming colony, an old man stared at the screen, tears in his eyes. "They're back," he whispered to his granddaughter. "The Terrans are back." Imperial command scrambles. Back in the Imperial capital, the War Council was in disarray. Admiral Vorson stood before the Emperor, surrounded by panicked advisors. "The Terrans are not just attacking our fleets," Vorson said, his tone grim. "They're attacking our image. That broadcast will inspire rebellion across the outer colonies." The Emperor, his expression cold and calculating, waved his hand dismissively. "A rebellion will be crushed, as all rebellions have been. What concerns me is their ability to broadcast across our secured networks." One of the Emperor's intelligence officers stepped forward. "We've traced the signal's origin, Your Majesty. It appears the Terrans have developed a new communication array capable of bypassing our encryption protocols." Vorson stiffened. "If they can do that, they can coordinate rebellions more effectively than we can respond." The Emperor's gaze hardened. "Then destroy it. I don't care what it takes. Find this array and wipe it from existence." The Iron Vanguard's hidden weapon. Meanwhile, aboard the Iron Vanguard, the crew celebrated their success. The broadcast had gone out unimpeded, and reports of unrest across the Empire were already pouring in. But Rhea wasn't celebrating. She stood in the war room with Lauren and her senior staff, studying the holographic map of the galaxy. "The Empire won't let this stand," she said. "They'll come for us, and they'll come hard." Lauren nodded. "The Omega fleet will regroup, and they'll throw everything they have at us. But we've inspired billions today, Captain. That's worth the risk." Rhea's gaze shifted to a small blinking icon on the map. It marked the location of the Terran fleet's greatest secret, a hidden facility deep in uncharted space, where their advanced technology was being developed. Among those technologies was something even more powerful than the Iron Vanguard itself, the Nova engine. "We'll make our stand at Nova Base," Rhea said. "If they want to crush this rebellion, they'll have to face the full force of Terran ingenuity." The crew exchanged determined glances. They knew the fight ahead would be brutal, but their cause was just. The galaxy was waking up, and the Empire's days of unchallenged dominance were numbered. A glimpse of treachery. Unbeknownst to the Terrans, a shadow loomed within their ranks. Deep in the engineering decks of the Iron Vanguard, a figure moved silently, placing a small device on one of the ship's power conduits. The device blinked once, then faded into invisibility. The saboteur smiled grimly. "The Empire isn't the only threat," they whispered before slipping away into the darkness. Captain Rhea had lit a fire across the galaxy, but she would soon learn that even the brightest flames could cast dangerous shadows. The traitor within. The Iron Vanguard glided through the darkness of space, heading toward the secret Nova base. Its crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage sustained during the battle against the Omega fleet. The ship's corridors buzzed with activity, yet an undercurrent of unease rippled through the ranks. The broadcast had galvanized billions, but it also painted a massive target on their backs. Captain Rhea paced the bridge, her mind racing. She was no stranger to risk, but something about the Empire's silence since the broadcast unnerved her. The Omega fleet had vanished from her scanners, and there had been no retaliatory attacks. It was too quiet. A growing shadow. Deep within the engineering decks, Chief Engineer Arlen was running diagnostics on the ship's power conduits when he noticed something strange. A faint energy signature pulsed along one of the conduits, irregular, almost imperceptible. "Hey, Vasia," Arlen called to his assistant, a wiry woman with a sharp mind. "Take a look at this. These readings don't match any of our systems." Vasia frowned, leaning over the console. "That's not normal. Could be residual damage from the battle. Or something worse," Arlen muttered, pulling out a handheld scanner. He followed the readings down a dimly lit corridor, the hum of the Iron Vanguard's engines masking his footsteps. As he turned a corner, he froze. A small, sleek device was attached to the conduit, its surface shimmering faintly. Arlen's stomach dropped. It was Imperial tech. Before he could react, a figure stepped out of the shadows. The saboteur moved with deadly precision, striking Arlen in the throat. He collapsed, gasping for air as the figure melted back into the darkness. Discovery on the bridge. "Captain, I think we have a problem," Vasia said, bursting onto the bridge. Her face was pale, her voice trembling. Chief Engineer Arlen found something. An Imperial device on the conduits. "I tried to reach him, but he's not responding." Rhea's eyes narrowed. An Imperial device. How did it get aboard? Vasia shook her head. "I don't know, but if it's tampering with our systems, we're in serious trouble." "Lauren," Rhea said, turning to her first officer, "lock down the engineering decks and assemble a security team. No one enters or leaves without my authorization." Lauren nodded, already issuing orders through his communicator. "If there's a saboteur on board, we'll find them." The traitor's moves. In the hidden depths of the ship, the saboteur watched through a hidden console as security teams combed the engineering decks. They smirked, their fingers flying across a touchscreen. The device on the conduits wasn't their only tool. Another, more insidious program had already been uploaded to the ship's systems. As the Iron Vanguard powered toward Nova Base, subtle malfunctions began to plague the crew. Shield generators flickered unpredictably. Long-range scanners displayed phantom readings. Even the ship's eye, Athena, reported anomalies she couldn't explain. On the bridge, Rhea's frustration grew. "Athena, run a full diagnostic of the ship's systems. I want every glitch identified and resolved." "I have already begun the process, Captain," Athena replied, her voice calm yet tinged with concern. "However, the anomalies suggest deliberate interference." "Deliberate," Lauren said, his brow furrowing. "So it's not just sabotage, it's active." The saboteur revealed. The search for the saboteur intensified. Security teams scanned every corner of the ship, questioning crew members and sealing off critical sections. The tension among the crew was palpable. Every glance, every hesitation, carried suspicion. It was Vasia who finally uncovered the saboteur's identity. While analyzing security footage, she spotted a figure entering restricted areas without authorization. Cross-referencing their movements with the malfunctions, she pieced together a chilling conclusion. She burst into the war room, where Rhea and Lauren were strategizing. "Captain, it's Lieutenant Hale." Rhea's expression darkened. Hale was a decorated officer, someone she had trusted implicitly. The thought of betrayal struck like a blade. "Are you certain?" Vasia nodded grimly. "The footage doesn't lie." He's been accessing systems he shouldn't and moving through the ship in ways that don't add up. Bring him in, Rhea said coldly. Alive. Interrogation. Hale was dragged into the war room, his hands bound. He didn't struggle, but his defiant smirk made Rhea's blood boil. So, Rhea began, her voice low and dangerous. You've been working for the Empire. Hale's smirk widened. You're smarter than I thought, Captain. Too bad it won't save you. Why? Rhea demanded. Why betray your own people? Hale chuckled. My people. You think this rebellion is noble, don't you? But it's chaos. The Empire may be cruel, but it's order. And order is what the galaxy needs. You sold us out for ideology. Lauren spat. You murdered Arlen for order. Hale didn't flinch. Arlen was a casualty. Just like you'll all be soon enough. Rhea stepped closer, her eyes blazing. What did you do to my ship? Hale hesitated, then his smile faltered. You'll find out soon enough. A deadly countdown. As Hale was secured in the brig, the crew discovered the extent of his sabotage. The device on the power conduits had been deactivated, but his program was far more dangerous. It had buried itself deep within the ship's navigation systems, setting the Iron Vanguard on a collision course with Nova Base. We have less than 2 hours before impact, Vasya said, her voice tight with urgency. And the program is encrypted. I can't shut it down. Rhea's fists clenched. Hale's betrayal wasn't just about disrupting their mission. It was about ensuring the destruction of their most vital asset. Lauren, take a team to the brig, Rhea ordered. If Hale won't give us the decryption code willingly, make him. Lauren nodded, his expression grim. Understood. A risky gamble. As time ticked away, Rhea made a decision. Prepare the escape pods, she said to her crew. If we can't regain control, we'll have to abandon ship. The words felt like acid on her tongue. The Iron Vanguard was more than a vessel. It was a symbol of hope. Losing it would be a devastating blow to the rebellion. In the brig, Hale laughed as Lauren's team confronted him. You think you can scare me into talking? I've already won. But Hale underestimated the Terran's resolve. Lauren's methods were direct and relentless. As the minutes ticked by, the saboteur's confidence cracked. In the final moments, Hale finally muttered the code, his voice bitter. Not that it matters. The Empire will always be stronger. A narrow escape. With mere minutes to spare, Vasya input the code, halting the Iron Vanguard's deadly trajectory. The crew erupted into cheers, but Rhea's face remained hard. The traitor had been caught, but the damage went deeper than a failed sabotage. Trust had been shaken, and the Empire now knew the Iron Vanguard's course. Rhea stared out the viewport, her resolve hardening. They'll come for us with everything they have, she said quietly, but we'll be ready. The rebellion had survived another day, but the battle was only beginning. Battle over the capital. The Empire wasted no time. With the sabotage of the Iron Vanguard thwarted, the Imperial High Command decided on a bold move to draw the Terran fleet into a decisive battle over the capital world, Ivalice Prime. It was a calculated gamble. Their defenses were unparalleled, but the risk of Terran retaliation reaching the Emperor himself was a terrifying prospect. Admiral Vorsen, now armed with the fully repaired Omega fleet, had been given a single directive: annihilate the Terrans at any cost. The calm before the storm. Aboard the Iron Vanguard, Captain Rhea stood before a holographic map of Ivalice Prime. Her senior officers gathered around her. The map displayed the planet's intricate web of defenses, orbital stations, fleets of Imperial warships, and planetary cannons capable of targeting ships in low orbit. It was a fortress designed to repel any invasion. They're trying to trap us, Rhea said, her voice cold and steady. They think if they can keep us over Ivalice Prime, they can grind us down until there's nothing left. Lauren crossed his arms. They're not wrong. This isn't just a stronghold. It's the heart of the Empire. They'll throw everything they have at us. Rhea's lips curled into a faint smirk. Let them. We didn't come this far to run now. Vasia chimed in, her expression determined. Captain, the Iron Vanguard is operational, and our weapons are fully charged. But even with our fleet, we'll need a plan to break through their defenses. Rhea nodded. Then we'll give them what they're not expecting. Chaos. The Terran plan. The Terran strategy relied on asymmetry. The Iron Vanguard and its fleet would not attack as a unified force. Instead, they would split into small, agile strike groups, each with a specific target. Orbital stations, shield generators, and key warships would be systematically dismantled to weaken the Empire's defenses. Meanwhile, Rhea revealed her trump card. The Iron Vanguard's prototype cloaking device. It hadn't been tested in full-scale battle, but it offered the potential to deliver a devastating surprise. While the rest of the fleet engages their forces, we'll cloak and penetrate their inner defenses, Rhea explained. Our target is the Imperial Command Spire, the nerve center of their planetary defenses. Without it, the rest of their system will crumble. The Empire strikes first. The Terran fleet entered the Ivolus system under heavy fire. The Empire had prepared for their arrival, positioning the Omega fleet in a defensive wall. Vorson stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Sovereign, watching the Terrans maneuver with unflinching resolve. They're trying to spread us thin, Vorson observed. Focus fire on their forward units. Keep them locked in the kill zone. The Omega fleet unleashed a torrent of firepower, and the Terrans suffered heavy losses. Smaller ships were torn apart, their debris scattering like sparks across the void. Yet the Terrans didn't falter. Their strikes were precise, targeting critical systems and forcing the Empire to divide its forces. The Iron Vanguard makes its move. As the battle raged, the Iron Vanguard vanished from the battlefield, activating its cloaking device. Rhea guided the ship into the shadow of Ivolus Prime, using the planet's gravitational pull to mask their movements. Every second of the approach was tense. If the cloaking failed, the entire ship would be vulnerable. We're in position, Vasia reported, her hands trembling over the controls. Activating EMP burst to disable their planetary shields. Now, a pulse of energy rippled from the Iron Vanguard, and the planetary shields over Ivolus Prime flickered before collapsing. On the surface, the Imperial Command Spire lit up with alarms as they scrambled to restore their defenses. Phase 1 complete, Rhea said, her voice firm. Prepare for orbital descent. Target their command infrastructure. A desperate defense. The Empire's response was swift. The Eternal Sovereign and a dozen Omega-class warships broke off from the main battle, heading straight for the Iron Vanguard. Vorson knew he couldn't allow the Terrans to strike the planet directly. Redirect all available firepower to their position, Vorson commanded. Do not let them breach the atmosphere. The Iron Vanguard decloaked just long enough to fire its main cannon, obliterating an orbital defense station. But the retaliation was immediate. Imperial warships unleashed a barrage that rocked the Terran ship to its core. Shields at 40%. Vasia shouted, sparks flying from her console. We can't take much more of this. Rhea gritted her teeth. Divert auxiliary power to the shields and engines. We're not stopping now. Infiltration of the command spire. As the Iron Vanguard hovered in low orbit, Rhea led a strike team to the surface in a small assault shuttle. The descent was harrowing, with anti-aircraft fire streaking through the sky, but the team managed to land near the command spire. Inside, chaos reigned. The Imperial officers hadn't expected the Terrans to reach the surface so quickly. Rhea's team moved with ruthless efficiency, disabling security systems and neutralizing guards as they fought their way toward the control center. Captain, Lauren said, covering her as they advanced, we've got incoming reinforcements. We need to move faster. We're almost there, Rhea replied, her pulse pounding. Hold them off as long as you can. The turning point. In the control center, Rhea placed a device on the central console, an override module designed to disable the Empire's planetary defenses permanently. As the countdown began, the room shook with explosions. Imperial forces were closing in, and the Terrans were running out of time. 5 minutes, Vasia said over the comms. "You need to get out of there, Captain." Rhea gritted her teeth. "We're not leaving until the job is done." As the override module completed its task, alarms blared across the spire. The planetary defenses went dark, leaving Ivalice Prime vulnerable to the Terran fleet. Rhea's team fought their way back to the shuttle, narrowly escaping as the spire erupted in flames behind them. Vorsen's last stand. Back in orbit, the Omega fleet began to collapse. With the planetary defenses offline, the Terran fleet renewed their assault, targeting the remaining Imperial warships. Vorsen, aboard the Eternal Sovereign, refused to retreat. "Activate the Singularity Cannon," Vorsen ordered, his voice grim. "If Ivalice Prime falls, it will not be intact." As the cannon powered up, Rhea's voice came through on an open channel. "Admiral Vorsen, stand down. This is over." Vorsen's face twisted with rage. "Never. The Empire will not fall to the likes of you." The Iron Vanguard fired its main weapon, striking the Eternal Sovereign's Singularity Cannon before it could fire. The explosion engulfed the Imperial flagship, and Vorsen's final scream was lost in the void. Victory and uncertainty. The Terrans had won the battle, but Rhea knew the war was far from over. As Ivalice Prime's skies burned, the Iron Vanguard hovered victoriously over the Imperial capital. On the surface, citizens looked up in awe and fear, realizing that the unthinkable had happened. The Empire had been brought to its knees. But Rhea's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. She knew the Empire wasn't finished, and neither were the forces lurking in the shadows. For now, the galaxy had hope, but the price of freedom was far from paid. Havoc and redemption. The skies of Ivalice Prime were stained with fire. The Imperial capital, once a gleaming beacon of the Empire's power, now lay in ruins. Plumes of smoke curled toward the stars, where the Terran fleet loomed victorious. The battle was over, but the silence that followed was anything but peaceful. The Emperor's final stand. Deep within the Imperial palace, the Emperor stood in the Grand Throne Room, surrounded by his remaining guards. The opulence of the chamber, a towering ceiling of gold and marble, banners of conquered worlds, now felt like a mausoleum. He clutched a ceremonial blade at his side, its edges glowing faintly with plasma. "Your Majesty," a nervous advisor stammered, "we must evacuate. The Terrans will be here any moment." The Emperor shook his head. "I will not run from rebels. This throne is my legacy, and I will die defending it." A rumble echoed through the palace as explosions shook the foundations. The Iron Vanguard's ground forces had breached the outer defenses. The guards tightened their grips on their weapons, their faces pale but resolute. Rhea's march. Captain Rhea led her strike team through the shattered streets of Ivalice Prime. The city was a battlefield, with pockets of Imperial resistance fighting desperately against Terran ground forces. Civilians watched from the shadows, their expressions a mixture of fear and awe. Lauren jogged up beside her, his rifle slung across his chest. "Captain, the palace is 2 clicks ahead. Intel suggests the Emperor hasn't fled." "He won't," Rhea replied, her voice hard. "He's too proud to abandon his throne. That pride will be his undoing." As they advanced, Rhea noticed a small child peeking out from the rubble. The child's face was smudged with soot, their wide eyes locked on her. She paused, kneeling down to offer a ration pack. "We're not here to hurt you," she said softly. "We're here to help." The child took the pack hesitantly, then disappeared back into the ruins. Lauren watched the exchange with a faint smile. "You think gestures like that will make a difference?" "They already have," Rhea replied, rising to her feet. "The people are watching. We need to show them that this fight is for them, not just revenge." The palace assault. The Terran strike team breached the palace gates with precision. Automated turrets were disabled, and guards fell one by one under the Terrans' superior tactics. As they pushed deeper into the grand halls, the echoes of their boots were met with eerie silence. The throne room doors stood before them, massive and foreboding. Rhea signaled her team to halt, then activated her comm. "This is Rhea. We've reached the Emperor's position." "Copy that," Veja's voice crackled through the channel. "We're holding the perimeter. No reinforcements will interrupt you." Rhea stepped forward, her pulse steady, but her mind sharp. "Stay here. I'll handle this." Lauren frowned. "Alone? That's suicide." "This isn't just a battle, Lauren. It's a message. The Emperor has to fall by my hand. The Emperor and the Captain." The throne room doors groaned open, revealing the Emperor seated on his ornate throne. He looked older than Rhea had expected, his face lined with the weight of decades of tyranny. But his eyes still burned with defiance. "So," he said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber, "the infamous Captain Rhea. I've heard of you, a soldier who fancies herself a savior." Rhea stepped forward, her weapon lowered but ready. "Your reign is over. Surrender, and I'll spare your life." The Emperor laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You think I fear death. I am the Empire. Killing me will not extinguish what I've built." He rose, drawing the plasma-edged blade. "Come then, rebel. Let us see if your convictions are as sharp as your weapons." The duel was swift and brutal. The Emperor moved with surprising agility, his blade cutting through the air in arcs of glowing light. Rhea countered with calculated precision, her movements honed by years of battle. Sparks flew as their weapons clashed, illuminating the darkened throne room. Finally, with a deft strike, Rhea disarmed the Emperor, sending his blade skittering across the floor. She leveled her weapon at his chest, her breathing heavy. "It's over," she said. The Emperor smiled faintly, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "You may kill me, Captain, but you will never destroy the idea of the Empire." Rhea hesitated for a fraction of a second, then pulled the trigger. The Emperor collapsed, his lifeless body slumping on the throne he had refused to abandon. A galaxy watches. As the Emperor fell, Rhea activated her communicator. "This is Captain Rhea. The capital is ours. The Emperor is dead." The transmission was broadcast across Imperial space, reaching every planet, every colony, and every ship. For the Loyalists, it was a moment of disbelief and despair. For the oppressed, it was a spark of hope. On the outer colonies, cheers erupted as workers and soldiers alike laid down their tools and weapons. For the first time in decades, the grip of the Empire loosened. Aftermath. The Terrans stood victorious, but the cost was staggering. The Iron Vanguard hovered over the scarred surface of Ivolus Prime, its hull marked by the battle. Rhea sat in her quarters, staring at a holographic map of the galaxy. The Empire's core worlds were in disarray, but pockets of resistance remained. Lauren entered, his expression grim. "The people are rallying, Captain, but the Empire's remnants are already regrouping. And there's something else." Rhea looked up sharply. "What?" Lauren hesitated. "Reports of a new faction. Former Imperial scientists and generals consolidating power. They're calling themselves the Dominion. They claim to be the true heirs of the Empire." Rhea exhaled slowly. "The fight isn't over." "No," Lauren agreed, a hint of a smile on his lips. "But we've shown the galaxy that the Empire can be beaten. That's a start." Rhea rose, her resolve unshaken. "Then we'll finish what we started. For the Terrans. For the galaxy." Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, a reminder that the battle for freedom was far from over, but so was humanity's will to fight.